my friends, means that we are developing now a new breed of cats. You know, when you read the Bible and you hear about old Daniel going in the lion's den, the Bible is so old, and the mythology of the Bible is not exact. When they lowered Daniel down in that lion's den, they might have been Black Panthers down there.
Late night at the Lege. Appreciate you guys showing up as you always do. You know, I'm glad you talked about the pressure on the system, because what it sounds like to me is that the reason why they were caught back up in the system was a lack of reentry, was a lack of being able to have access to the services that they need not to go back in. And so I want to talk about and sit with that for a moment, right? And think about when our loved ones come home, what kind of support do we need to be giving them? And what kind of support should the Department of Corrections be responsible for providing?
And I think this is a good, for people to put a human side to it, to see our faces. And that's what we're trying to do, to put a human side to this. You was asked earlier, you know, what type of services and reentry things do they have coming home? When my loved one first got out the first time, there was no options. And at the time, he was on parole, which I think they've even changed the parole laws in Florida since then. And so I had went to visit him. We met as teenagers, as pen pals. I went to go visit him for the first time. And my dad at the time had a business here. So we had everything set up for him to come back to Texas. They would not release him back to Texas from that. If he'd gotten that chance, it could have changed his entire life. You know, now he was doing this whole COVID thing. They stopped everything, but he was a mentor there, you know, helping some of the young guys, leading them in the right path, you know, as they came in there. But they don't have anything to help them, you know, once they get out here. So one of the things that we did, we started a trucking company. And I'm very proud to tell everybody, my husband started this while he was in prison. Like, this was his idea. I just rolled out here for him. I'm just his legs out here and his mouth out here. But this is his. He has a brilliant brain. He runs this from there and calls and tells me what to do, what not to do, a lot of what not to do. But this is his. And they have opportunities to do that. I mean, there's so many people who've gotten out that he's like, okay, such and such is getting out. You need to connect with him because I need you to set up his DBA. I need you to do this. I need to do that. You know, so now we look at the trucking industry. That's the reentry program that we have. That's our ministry, because so many people can get in this field and you don't have anybody watching over you. You can drive your truck, be free, do what you need to do. So that's our biggest push as far as reentry and helping in this. In Texas, it's been a big move with helping with trucking as a reentry program, because the states don't seem to be doing much.
Bobby, when he came back to Florida, he had been released from prison in Virginia and he moved back with us. And he was, you know, hooked up because he was still on probation or parole. He was hooked up with the reentry program. This was in 2007 in Pinellas County, Florida. And basically what they did for him was give him 3 pieces of paper with phone numbers of places he could call for a job. And guess what? A lot of them were disconnected and most of them wouldn't hire him anyway. So it was basically a totally ineffective system. It didn't help him at all. And the other piece of Bobby's issue was the addiction that he was struggling with. And he was put on methadone to stay off of the other drugs, medical methadone. He went to the clinic every morning. And that's how we kind of all got all of this started, was when he tried to come off the methadone to get into treatment when everything went wrong for him. And I don't even think it necessarily starts when they get out. It needs to be going on now. There's no programs going on in Florida, hardly at all, to prepare them for when they get out. And you know what? Most of our people are going to get out. And would you rather have them prepared or not prepared when they do? So it needs to start before they go, but there needs to be support for employment. There needs to be support for the families to understand it's not going to be easy when they come home. You know, Bobby's wife, they got married 6-7 years ago while he was incarcerated. They've never lived together. So when he does finally get out and come home, his wife was here for Christmas, and we were talking about what an adjustment that's going to be for both of them.
My loved one was a juvenile when he was first convicted. That's something that we have to, look at and think about. In our prison system, there are really no programs. Everything is non-existent. And the programs that he was involved in, like he used to help tutor, in education, and they're non-existent. These men are just sitting idle. They've had lockdown several times, and they want to say that it's due to certain things, but so these programs are non-existent. These men and women are sitting idle.
You touched on that point that I wanted to uplift, was the number of women, because oftentimes we forget that there's a number of women who are incarcerated and dealing with the same issue. And you all touched on COVID, and you all touched on, that these folks are being warehoused. When you look at the COVID infection rate, it is much higher for people in prison than the people that work in prisons. The mortality rate for people in prison is higher than the folks who are working in the prison. One of the ways for us to vaccinate folks is to release them. One way for us to kill COVID in prisons is to make sure folks have access to freedom. Now, I want to touch on restorative justice.
My granddaughter was murdered. Well, she was shaken in 1993 by her father when she was 6 weeks old. And she ultimately died as a result of the injury. Her brain was devastated. She lived for 3 years, but she died. I got very involved in restorative justice, going to some of the conferences, and I was invited to a circle for families of murder victims. And in that circle, that restorative justice circle, I forgave my ex-son-in-law. Even though he never asked for forgiveness, I forgave him. And I cannot tell you, there are no words to explain how much that changed my life, letting go of that anger and just the forgiveness. And with restorative justice, in many situations we've seen where the person who committed the crime actually will sit in a circle with his support system, and the victim will be there with their support system, and they will talk, and they will be very brutally honest. And everyone I know that's ever participated in it has said it's been so healing and so freeing for everybody involved. And it just breaks my heart that we're not doing so much more of that. We could be such a better world if we would focus on restorative justice instead of punitive justice.
I'd have to say that I'm totally surprised Florida would ever have anything to do with it. So was that when he was in Virginia or when he was in Florida?
I was not at the restorative justice thing. I just forgave him on my own because it was in listening to the stories and in the guidance we were getting. I knew that's what I needed to do. And in that safe place of that restorative justice circle, I was actually able to find that forgiveness. And it was huge.
The reason I say that is because when Mr. Lewis has talked about the governor having that opposite, the opportunity to give clemency to help release some of this pressure, his idea of releasing the pressure was adding a $5,000 incentive to employ more people.
So I don't think he's granted clemency to anybody as far as I know.
Yeah. In his tenure. In Florida, it's kind of been a history with the prisons that, your grandfather worked there, so your dad worked there, so you worked there. But this younger generation, they're not into this working in prisons anymore. So they're not having that. And some of these prisons are so far out. Like when I go visit my loved one, I drive from Texas 11 hours. Then I stay the closest place to it, which is still 2 hours away. So I still got to drive another 2 hours to get to them. So there's not a lot of population of people who are traveling, going out of their way. And also when you look at it, like when I went out, they had a sign. Me and my sister just laughed at it, $1,000 bonus and pay $16 an hour. You can go to Chick-fil-A and get $17 an hour. So who's going to do that? So they need to realize that this, hot cake that they got boiling here, they need to do something to let it go. Even when the Sheriff's Association had posted the video and opposed to what we were saying, all the comments, they had, I think, probably 1,500 views or something on that video, but all the comments came from our PRR family. Like people were looking at it, but no one was saying anything or moving the needle, and they could not respond to, what we were telling them.
And it touched on something about compassion that I want to come back to. So the state attorney has no compassion, and he was not the one who was harmed.
Mhm.
Yet Janet, as someone who had been harmed, was able to show compassion. What do you think keeps people from being compassionate, even though they aren't the ones who have been harmed?
I wish I knew the answer to that, because then maybe we could solve this problem. I just don't get how people are that hard and cold and punitive. It's the whole lock them up and throw away the key, and they're less than human. And
Mhm.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, if it was a change, I think in judges there, I think recently they did change the Department of Corrections Secretary. The person that was there before was a little bit more compassionate for those behind walls than the person is there now. And even in my loved one's case, the the people that he supposedly committed this offense to, they were writing letters telling, the judges, the lawyers, that this was not his fault. He didn't do this. We take some of the blame for this. And it wasn't just one person, it was several people, but they never, got past that, that this was a person who committed offenses in the past, and we're going to give him this PRR, and he's just going to stay in there for the rest of his life.
And we're gonna come back and talk about reentry, a whole piece on reentry, because that's gonna be important. And I want to bring you all back. And this is for my policy people and the people who are involved in the processes. So you said the bill was caught in the Judiciary Committee, and we're going to still need some votes to get it out of committee and off of the floor. But I asked you about the process in the House, because it still has to clear the other chamber.
We've not been able to get anybody to create a bill for the House, a matching bill to go through. We've not been able to find anybody willing to use up one of their slots to do this bill for us. That's how unpopular criminal justice reform is in Florida right now.
And we don't have a House sponsor to carry the Senate version of the bill.
Right. And there's nothing comparable happening in the House at all.
And I think the ones that are working a criminal justice bill has their own already in place. So like Janet said, as we learned going through this, they have like two options. And so, because I think Senator Hart, I believe that's her name, she had a bill last session that would have really been good as far as the game time, and that kind of died out. And I think she's pushing that again this year. And one of the other people that would be, they have their own already.
Both of you kind of hit on, sometimes bills catch steam off season. And then when the session starts, we lose our support. Those lawmakers have other commitments and other bills up to bat, because sometimes people feel like that their bill is the only bill. So can you talk about how surprising it was to find out that there were so many bills that have to kind of go through this process?
I've actually been through the process after Kimberlin was shaken. I needed to do something, so I decided to get out and talk about shaken baby syndrome, and I actually got a law passed in 2002. It's called the Kimberlin West Act of 2002, named after my granddaughter. And it requires that any time a baby is born in the state of Florida, the parents get educated on coping with crying and what to do if they get frustrated. It took me 10 years to get that law passed. And that was basically a warm, fuzzy, we're going to protect children law. And it was not easy to get passed because of monetary concerns and things like that, who was going to pay for it.
And just to get a bit wonky, is there a fiscal note attached to 746 that is also keeping it from getting out of committee?
Not that I know of.
Not that we know of. Yeah.
So there's no fiscal reason for,
right.
And probably it will save the state money.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. PRR it only took 2.5 months for it to become law, from the day that it was read on the floor of, I believe, the House, until it was enacted into law. 2.5 months is all it took. And our group, all that we are asking for is appropriate sentencing. Appropriate sentencing.
One of the ladies who you spoke to, Ms. Conway, at first, Brenda, her son is serving a life sentence. And that's kind of how this came about, you know, mothers, wives, sisters fighting for our loved ones and just keeping the voice out there, to where she's been so committed that she's moved to Florida during the sessions and she's at the Capitol every day. So these ladies, even the ladies here, you know, they take time out of their schedule, taking off from work, going to Tallahassee. They're at our tables. They're talking to the different people in the legislature.
Across the country, people just like you are dealing with loved ones who have been wrongly convicted, overly sentenced, and come from hyper-policed communities. And in closing, I want to say, as someone who was formerly incarcerated, that was also on parole for 12 years, that I appreciate the work that you're doing. I remember the hours my mom drove to come to see me in prison. But yet she wasn't able to provide me the kind of support I needed coming home, because she didn't have folks like you who were there to educate her. So I want to say I honor your work. I thank you, and we're going to have you all back again. I want people to be able to support us and get in touch with you. What is the best way for people to find you and help you?
We have a website. It's www.PRRFan.org. We have a Facebook group, private group, and we have a public group, and it's PRR Families. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on TikTok, PRR Families. So we're out there, every social media avenue we can get to. We're out there trying to make our little voices heard. Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you all. Appreciate you guys showing up. World famous late night at the Lege once again. Some amazing folks from Florida, and we're going to have them back on. Y'all make sure to tune in, and we're going to keep making sure that folks are phenomenal and not forgotten. All right, you guys have an amazing rest of the evening. We'll talk to you later. Have a good one.